why can't you get this right? You're my son. The words hit the walls like a cold bell. Late afternoon light striped the polished oak floor of the Whitmore house in Marin County. The bands of sun lying at an angle, thin as rungs on an invisible ladder. From the kitchen, a clean lemon scent drifted out, freshly wiped countertops, warm air from the oven cycling on and off. Beyond the glass, the hill behind the house wore a pale green, as if the wind had just brushed it smooth. Noah sat small in a chair he didn't quite fit, shoulders curled. Sneakers hooked around the chair's crossbar like a child trying to hold on to a moving train. He wasn't crying. He watched the light move across the floor as if the day might give him an answer the worksheet wouldn't. Pens lay scattered like dropped sticks after a campfire game, and a single eraser, clean, almost untouched, sat at the corner of the table for decoration more than use. Daniel stood at the head of the table, one hand braced on a stack of reports, the other at his temple where a thin vein beat. He loved the boy. Anyone with eyes could see that. But love, when it gets tangled with fear, hardens into something that looks like anger from the outside. He inhaled, long and slow, the way a man calms himself before saying something that will echo. You've failed 4 tests in a row. Not to disturb it. I don't know, he said, voice almost air. The clock in the hallway ticked in a steady, dispassionate rhythm, time doing what time does. At the threshold by the pantry door, Grace Allen stopped the wheels of her cleaning cart with the side of her foot. She hadn't meant to hear any of it. She'd been thinking about whether the lemons would last the week and whether the laundry cycle would finish before the fog rolled in over the ridge. But the sentence, "You're my son," had found her. And with it came a chord that hummed down a corridor of her own memory. She saw a kitchen that wasn't this one, a voice that wasn't Daniel's. A girl who had learned early how to be quiet around frustration. Daniel set his jaw and reached for his coat. I have to catch a flight, he said. We'll talk when I get back. He glanced at Noah. She wiped her palms on the apron she wore out of habit more than need and nudged the cart back against the wall. She approached slowly, a person coming into a room with a sleeping bird. Hey. A little, she said. And a lot of fun. Grace pulled out a small ceramic bowl and placed it on the table. She checked the pantry, no candy, but there were lemon drops in a jar labeled for guests. She took a handful, their wrappers whispering like small sails, and poured them into the bowl. The sun found them, each piece catching light like a tiny lemon lantern. Step 1, she said. We play with real things. She separated 3 lemon drops from the rest and set them in a neat little group. These are 3. She put 2 in their own group. These are 2. Can you show me 3 plus 2 without using the paper at all? Just the candy. Noah looked from the bowl to her hands. He didn't move at first. Perhaps afraid to do the wrong thing in front of someone who would notice. Grace leaned back, hands open. You're the boss, she said. He reached, slow and careful, and slid the 2 lemon drops over to the 3, nudging them until they formed a small, perfect cluster, 5 suns in a milky sky. He didn't smile. But he didn't flinch either. Nice, Grace said. Not with the bright praise adults sometimes spray like confetti, but with a satisfied tone that invited more. Now step 2. She pulled a sticky note from her apron and drew 5 small circles. Then a simple line beneath them. Same idea, but as a picture. You can even make them little lemons if you want. He took the pen and drew 5 ovals with a shaky confidence. One was a little bigger than the others. He frowned at it, then shrugged, as if maybe all lemons are allowed to be different. He tapped the page. 5. Exactly. Grace slid the worksheet a few inches farther away, as if it had been too close to breathe. Last step, she said. We write it as numbers, just to see what that looks like. She wrote, 3 plus 2 is equal to 5. Your brain gets to walk the path 3 times, and by the third time, it recognizes the view. Noah's eyes tracked the symbols like a bird tracks a current. So it's not tricks. No tricks, Grace said. Just a slower road that becomes a faster one once you know where it goes. They did it again, this time with 4 and 1, then with 2 groups of 3. Grace let him make decisions that didn't matter, what color pen to use for the circles. Whether the groups of candy should be close or slightly apart, as if the choices were small doors he could open for himself. When he made a mistake and counted a lemon drop twice, she said, "Try again." In a tone that treated errors like breadcrumbs rather than verdicts. Outside, a wind line moved across the hill, darkening the grass before letting it brighten again. The house breathed. In the kitchen, the timer chimed and then settled. Someone in the back garden laughed on a phone call and walked away. "Okay," Grace said after a few minutes. "Weird challenge. If 2 lemon drops roll away because the table is not level," she tipped the bowl slightly and 2 candies drifted toward the rim. "How many are left?" He counted without touching, lips moving. Then reached to test himself and came up with the same answer. The verification put a small spark behind his eyes. "What about this, 2 and 2 and 1? She set them in separate groups, absent-mindedly arranging them to mirror the slats of sunlight. "What's the smart way to see it?" 2 and 2 is 4, he said, quicker now, "and 1 more is 5. Show me as a picture." He drew. The circles were smaller this time, more sure of their own edges. He stared at them for a second, then, without prompting, wrote 2 plus 2 plus 1 is equal to 5 under the row. His numbers a little wobbly but undeniably his. Grace didn't clap. She looked at the page the way you look at a landmark you knew you would reach if you kept walking. "There you go," she said. "That's your road." He stared at the line of symbols he had made and then at the 5 real lemon drops on the table. Something unknotted behind his sternum. It wasn't victory exactly. It was the opposite of panic, which, for a child, is the bigger miracle. He put his hands flat on the table, palms warming against the wood. "It's not as loud," he said, surprising himself. Grace kept the pace easy, like walking under trees. A few times, when her hand moved toward the pen too quickly, she paused and pulled back, letting Noah be the person who advanced the game. At some point, his face did a new thing. The corners of his mouth lifted, cautious, as if he were testing a stare that had once given way. Then it tipped into something unguarded, a sudden, clean laugh, quick as a swallow of water. Grace closed her eyes and let the sound land. He looked at the page again, then at her, and his voice found a confidence it hadn't worn all day. "I think I can see it." Cut to black. The laugh hung in the lemon-sweet air for a heartbeat, and then the house exhaled with it. Outside, the Marin Hills softened into evening. Inside, the heater hummed like a cat settling into a chair. Grace left the bowl of lemon drops on the table, the wrappers whispering like tiny flags, and Noah leaned closer. As if numbers had finally lowered their voice to a tone he could hear. Then came days stitched together by small, private classrooms. In the laundry room, the dryer drummed a steady beat. And the tile underfoot was cool even at noon. Grace taped a narrow number line along the lid of the washer and pinned socks to a string with wooden clothespins, 3 on one side, 2 on the other. "Same idea. Just friendlier," she said. The click of clothespins sounded like castanets. Noah slid 1 pin at a time to make 5. Eyes widening when the line on the washer matched what he felt in his hands. When he double counted, she pointed gently. "Good catch," noticing that. "Try again." It was praise that respected the work more than the result. In the greenhouse, the air was warm and damp and carried the sweet mineral smell of fresh potting soil. Sunlight laid squares on the concrete like paper placemats. Grace used bottle caps from the recycling bin as counters, arranging them in rows to show how 2 4s look different from 4 2s but still add to 8. She drew chalk circles on the flagstones and turned them into stepping stones. Skip count, she said, clapping a rhythm. 2, 4, 6, 8, clap, clap, pause. Let the numbers ride the beat, not the other way around. Noah hopped the circles, landing on 6 with both feet. Then spun to see if he could do it backward, giggling at his own wobble. I like how you tried a new way, Grace told him. That's your brain getting braver. She named the strategy. You looked for a pattern, she'd say. You checked your work like a detective. Those were compliments he could use later when nobody was watching. They kept it quiet because quiet made it feel safe. One afternoon, in the greenhouse, Noah worked with rows of caps in 2s. He tapped out a beat on his thigh, 2, 4, 6, until a shadow crossed the path outside the glass. A car door shut. The front door opened. It wasn't time yet. Grace heard it too, footsteps, quick and steady. The scratch of a key tray on the entry table. She pressed her palm to the caps to keep them from sliding and lifted her eyes to Noah. He went still, eyes going large and clear as glass marbles. Daniel stepped into the greenhouse doorway with the late light at his back. The clean lemon smell from the kitchen trailed him like a ribbon. He took in the chalk circles on the stones. Flat box on the breakfast table. He stood beside it, hands in pockets, as if he had brought something fragile home across a bridge and wasn't yet sure how to give it. When Grace opened the box, the paper crinkled and the light caught on gloss. Inside lay a whiteboard the size of a door, its surface blank as a fresh field after snow. A tray of markers sat in a row, black, red, blue, green. And the sudden permission in the room changed the way the light lay on the walls. They mounted the board in the nook where the sun warmed the oak. Grace tested a marker, the squeak was crisp. I like how you're checking with the rhythm. That's smart. They stacked magnets to make small towers, evens on one side. That's your brain noticing order. It'll be there the next time you need it. Daniel didn't interrupt. He stood at the doorway with a coffee and watched the scene unfurl. The whiteboard turning from a blank snowfield into a place where paths could be made. The set of his face was still guarded, but there was something like weather breaking in his eyes. The house listened. Later, when the lesson gave way to dishes and the board shone with just enough smudge to look lovingly used, a staff member passed the nook. He was young, a temp from the agency. Quiet in the way people are when they plan not to be noticed. His glance caught on the bright magnets arranged along the board's bottom edge. She simply drew a neat blue plus in the corner of the whiteboard with a marker and said, "We'll lend the board a helper today." Noah nodded, eyes drifting to the empty spot. As steady as the pen he held. That care is going to help you in other places too. Later, when they reached for the tablet to scroll through the photos of yesterday's work, a habit that soothed Noah by letting him see he had walked this road before, the album opened to a blank grid. The pictures were gone. Noah's breath caught at the same time Grace's did, 2 threads pulled tight by the same hand. She set the tablet down as if it were more fragile now. Then we'll rebuild our trail, she said, pulling a fresh stack of sticky notes. We can make today strong enough to remember without a camera. They worked. And the missing things kept not being there. Grace salvaged. She taped the edges of the revived number cards, turned a clean sponge into a temporary eraser. And tucked the remaining magnets into a small, lidded bowl when they weren't using them, as if they were pearls that liked to roll away. She wrote a list of replacements in the back of her notebook. A list that didn't accuse anyone, just told the future what it would need: new magnets, a second eraser, a small cloth bag for counters. In the slow burns of ordinary time. 5 minutes after a new idea, they returned to it with something easy, like high fives for the mind. 10 minutes later, they touched it again, this time with a small twist, 2 more, 1 less. A new arrangement of the same 5. After 24 minutes, Grace's watch chimed a softer tone for that. They circled back with a tiny riddle. If you had 6 buttons and gave 2 to me, what would you have? She asked. Noah looked at the board, then back at the row of rescued cards on the counter. And the answer came easy because his brain had met the idea 3 times already and recognized the view. When fear tried to sit beside him, Grace made the seat smaller. Let's start here, she would say, and here was always a place he could step without slipping. 1 lemon drop plus 1 lemon drop. A picture of 2 circles. The symbols underneath. If he stalled. She lowered the step so the first movement was success, errorless entry, and then let difficulty arrive only after confidence had taken a breath. See, she'd say, but never in a way that crowded him. You were already on your way. Adela Brooks moved through the room like the reliable weather she had always been, silver hair pinned back, sleeves rolled neatly. Eyes that had watched households stand and bend for decades. She paused in the doorway of the nook longer than usual, polishing cloth in hand. Her mouth set in a line that had held the words "This house had order" more times than anyone could count. This house had order, she said again, almost reflexively, wiping the top of a picture frame. But her eyes didn't leave Noah's hands as he adjusted a tower to correct an uneven base. He did it without prompting, a small self-repair that belonged to him. The cloth stilled. Grace looked up. We're finding a new kind, she said, respectful. Not noisy. Just steady. Adela sniffed softly, which in her language meant I'm not convinced, but I'm not unconvinced either. She started to say something else, then watched Noah check his work and make a tiny note on a sticky square, for has a partner that looks like it. The boy's penmanship was determined, his line true. Adela said, not quite a word. In the afternoon, as the sun slid across the floor in bright bars, Noah met a little wall. The 10-minute return felt like a test and his throat tightened. Grace shifted the ground under his feet to something more forgiving. Touch and tell, she said, sliding 2 buttons toward him. 1 at a time. No rush. He touched, counted, breathed. And the wall thinned into a curtain he could push aside. Grace named the moment. You slowed the problem down, she said. That's a clever move. It wasn't praise for being smart. It was praise for being skillful. Noah tucked the sentence into his pocket like a smooth stone. When the lesson ended, the nook looked like a place that had been used by people who cared about what they were doing. The whiteboard carried the faint shadow of old lines, the good kind of tired. The magnets in the bowl clicked against each other quietly. The revived cards stacked in neat, dry piles. The sticky note flags fluttered in a current of warm air from the vent. Grace gathered the tablet to upload a fresh set of photos for Noah's nighttime review. She paused, thumb hovering over the album icon, then pressed. The images slid into place, today's work standing bright and present where yesterday's had been erased. She glanced toward the hall where the temp had walked yesterday. The corridor was empty now. She leaned in, voice low, meant for one person only. Someone wants you to fail, she said. Grace looked up, the question already in her eyes before she could shape it with her mouth. The subject line still glowed on Grace's phone, bright as a warning flare, meeting request, concerns about non-credentialed instruction. She hadn't yet found breath enough to answer when the front door opened with a precise click. Vanessa Reed arrived on a hush of cool perfume and heels that didn't forgive scuffs. Her blazer was winter white, her hair a smooth dark line, her eyes the color of polished stone. She paused at the edge of the breakfast nook, taking in the whiteboard, the tidy bowls of counters. The rescued magnet sleeping under a lid. She didn't smile. My son needs structure, she said crisply, not experiments. The lemon brightness in the kitchen seemed to thin. Daniel stepped in behind her, one hand around a coffee he'd forgotten to drink. "Vanessa," he began, measured, "we've seen improvement." "Improvement without oversight," she cut in. She tapped the email on Grace's screen with a manicured finger. "The school agrees there's a concern. And I do too." As if summoned by her sentence, the doorbell rang again. The return address carried the school's crest and a line of administrative titles. He slid a finger under the seal and read quickly, jaw tightening. "They want a credentialed tutor on file," he said. Voice low. "Any continued support at home must be led or overseen by a licensed instructor. They want documentation, lesson plans, alignment." Vanessa lifted her chin. "Exactly. Structure." A second envelope followed within the hour, certified mail this time, the ink on the receipt still damp. Daniel read and stilled. He didn't speak right away. Grace steadied the edge of the table with her hand. "It's from her lawyer," he said finally. "Notice of intent to seek modification of custody. Educational mismanagement." He swallowed. "They cite the tests Noah failed, staff complaints, and the fact that an unlicensed household employee has been acting as a tutor." Vanessa's face didn't move. "I will always act in Noah's best interest. This is about doing things right." Daniel looked at the whiteboard, then at his son's drawings on the fridge, a row of lemon-yellow suns. He closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were the eyes of a father who knows that optics can bruise as much as facts. "We have to pause the formal sessions," he said to Grace, each word chosen. Heavy. "Just until we meet with the school. Until this is clearer. I can't give them reasons to say we're reckless." Grace felt the room tilt, the way a ferry does in a crosswind. She thought of Noah's first laugh, of the laundry room's gentle hum, of the way the numbers had lowered their voice. "I understand," she said. It was not surrender, it was triage. Noah had been standing halfway down the hall, the exact distance a child chooses when he wants to hear without being seen. He stepped forward now, eyes uncertain. The green marker he loved rolling slowly between his fingers. The room blurred behind him. "Are you leaving me too?" he whispered. The sentence found something old in Grace and touched it lightly. She knelt so his face was level with hers, the whiteboard a silent witness behind them. "Never," she said. "I am here. We'll be careful. But I am here." She cleaned the board, slow and thorough. Not erasing the work but smoothing the surface for later. Daniel watched, hands in pockets, a man trying to hold two truths at once. "Thank you," he said. And the words were too small for what they needed to carry. The house rearranged itself around the new rule. In the daytime, the whiteboard shone blank, the markers tucked away. The magnets sleeping under their lid. Grace moved through rooms with her ordinary tasks, polishing, folding, setting, her eyes finding Noah's at the quiet edges of hallways. They didn't speak lessons aloud. They let their plans sit behind the ordinary, like a melody you hum under your breath so no one hears until it's time. When dusk settled, the laundry room warmed to a gentle glow under the floor lamp. The dryer's drum spun a soft rhythm, and the air smelled like cotton and a hint of rain. Grace spread a clean towel on the floor beside the counter and set out a pencil, a little stack of cards, and a single small bowl of buttons. Noah slipped in with a careful quiet, shutting the door until the latch whispered home. 3 short rounds, Grace said, tapping her watch, keeping it ordinary, doable. 12 minutes, then a break. Again. Then a third. We'll make them count. On the table, she laid a narrow strip of paper with 3 boxes and a small sheet of stickers, stars, dots, tiny lemon slices. "This is yours," she told him. "When you finish a round, you choose a sticker. This is not a reward, it's a record. It tells your brain, I show up. Round 1, 12 minutes. Beat the timer, Noah named it, grinning shyly. 2 sets that make 10. A skip count to 18. A tiny riddle about sharing buttons. Grace kept the steps gentle and certain, errorless entry, no cliffs at the start, only small slopes. When he hesitated, she hummed the rhythm they used in the greenhouse, tap, tap, pause, and he found the next step like a handrail in the dark. The timer sang. He chose a lemon slice sticker and pressed it into the first box with care. Break, 2 minutes. They listened to the dryer and the evening cricket that lived somewhere behind the vent. Noah sipped water and leaned his shoulder against hers as if they were waiting for a bus only they knew was coming. Round 2, 13 minutes. Picture and say, Grace said. She drew quick circles on a card and placed the buttons to match. Tell me the story, she invited. He narrated, 3 and 2 makes 5. 2 and 2 and 1 is 5. He highlighted the clue words with his voice, makes, and, is, without a marker. Think aloud, borrowed, becoming his. He chose a silver star this time and smoothed its edges down with a fingernail. Break, 3 minutes. Footsteps in the hall. Grace's head lifted, she switched off the lamp. The dryer hummed on. The footsteps passed. The lamp clicked back, gentled. Round 3, 15 minutes. Quick look, Noah said, naming it himself now. Grace flashed a card, 4 dots in a square, 1 dot alone. He subitized 5 and wrote the numeral with intent, not rush. A short word problem appeared in Grace's neat hand, 2 cousins share 6 lemon drops equally. How many each? He circled equally with his finger in the air and whispered, 3. Then sketched 3 small circles like tiny suns and smiled as if he'd recognized a friend in a crowd. He placed a green dot sticker in the 3rd box and leaned back, exhale long, shoulders down. Look what you did, Grace said softly, pointing to the strip. You showed up 3 times. Your brain loves practice spaced out like this. It builds strong paths. He tucked the strip into the pocket of his pajama pants like a passport. On the way out, they paused by the whiteboard in the dark breakfast nook. It reflected only their silhouettes and the thin line of moon on the glass. Grace touched the edge. We'll keep this quiet for now, she said. Quiet can be strong. The next morning. The house resumed its careful choreography. Daniel left for a meeting with the school administration, files aligned, language ready. Adela carried a vase of eucalyptus into the nook. The silver leaves catching light like coins. She set it down and met Grace's eyes for a long breath that said, I see you, without words. Then she moved on. Vanessa's car appeared in the driveway just after lunch, glossy and exact. She moved through the foyer with purposeful grace, phone already at her ear. She didn't glance at the whiteboard. She didn't need to. I have the emails, she said into the line, voice cool enough to leave a trace of frost. And the school's position. If they won't protect him, the court will. The laundry room light was a warm yellow, steady as a candle that refused to flicker. The dryer hummed its low drumbeat, familiar as a heartbeat. As Grace laid out the practice packet that looked too big for Noah's hands. He sat cross-legged on the folded towel, pencil tapping a rhythm on his knee. Outside. Rain ticked against the window like an impatient metronome. He opened to the reading passage and stalled. The words loomed, dense and endless. A wall that stretched higher each time his eyes climbed it. His fingers hovered near the page as if touching the text might burn. Grace noticed the shallow rise of his chest. Let's breathe it back down, she murmured. She pressed a palm lightly to her ribs. In for 4. Hold. Out for 6. Long enough to tell your brain, we are steady. Noah copied her. The pencil finally still. She guided him with her voice. Look for clue words. Circle what matters. Skip the extra noise. His eyes skimmed again. This time he circled storm, boat, rescue. He whispered them under his breath, the way a traveler repeats street names to stay on the right path. The sentences began to shrink into something he could manage. Now highlight the question words. Grace added, drawing a line under main idea. What is it asking, not what do you fear it's asking? He nodded. He tried. He wrote haltingly, then scratched, then tried again. And when the timer chimed, he had an answer on the page, imperfect but his own. He leaned back, exhaled, and for the first time did not look immediately defeated. Later that week, under Westbridge Academy's vaulted ceiling, Noah faced the official test. Rows of desks, fluorescent buzz, the antiseptic scent of pencil shavings and floor polish. Daniel sat outside with his briefcase, Grace with her folded hands, both pretending not to measure every passing minute. The math section arrived like sunlight through a storm gap. Equations. Patterns, sequences, this was the bridge Noah knew how to cross. He worked with a quiet rhythm, lips moving just enough to mouth the skip-count cadence Grace had sung in the greenhouse. For multiple choice, he struck two options with a confident slash, elimination, and weighed the rest aloud in his head. When numbers seemed tangled, he reversed the problem, plugging the answer back in to see if it fit. Reverse checking. His smile grew with each small victory, the kind of smile that had once been unthinkable. When the proctor called time, Noah set down his pencil gently, as if closing a door without a slam. Grace caught the spark in his eyes as he walked out, Daniel's hand landing on his shoulder with the rare softness of pride. 2 weeks later, the envelope arrived. Daniel slid it open at the breakfast nook, the lemon light returning for one fragile moment. He read, stopped, read again. Then his laugh cracked the air open like thunder without rain. He passed, Daniel said, voice roughened. Westbridge accepts him. Full scholarship. And, they recommend advanced math placement. They called his reasoning, exceptional. The words landed like a benediction. Grace felt her throat ache. Noah stood frozen, then hooped, a sound too loud for the room but perfect anyway. He danced a half circle on the kitchen tiles, his socks sliding, his joy unmeasured. Grace blinked fast, unwilling to blur the sight. You built this, Noah, she whispered. You climbed your own bridge. The moment held for a breath too long. Then Daniel's phone vibrated across the table, screen flaring cold against the yellow light. A new email. Subject line sharp enough to cut, educational custody concerns. He read silently. The color in his face drained. He handed the phone to Grace without a word. The lawyer's text was brisk. Merciless, while we commend Noah's achievement, the delay in identifying his needs reflects prolonged educational neglect. The sudden improvement, though promising, underscores how long proper intervention was denied. This result strengthens our case for court-ordered oversight. Grace's stomach turned. What should have been a coronation now felt like an indictment. The same evidence that crowned Noah's effort was being twisted into a blade. Across the table, Noah hugged his acceptance letter, unaware of the shadows creeping from its edges. He beamed at the seal, his finger tracing the gold crest. His world was suddenly larger, safer. He did not yet know that joy could be stolen even while it was still unfolding. Grace looked at Daniel, who had not moved. His hand pressed against his forehead as if to stop a storm from splitting him in two. The lemon scent, once fresh, felt too sharp in her throat. She spoke softly, so only he could hear. Did we just win the school, and lose the home? The question hung between them for only a moment. Did we just win the school and lose the home, before the calendar answered. The hearing arrived like weather you can see coming from miles away and still can't stop. The courtroom felt colder than it looked, warm wood panels, tall windows letting in a pale Marin sky. And yet a chill that lived in the space between words. Daniel sat at counsel table, jaw set, hands folded too carefully on a legal pad whose blank line suggested an order he couldn't find. Vanessa sat opposite, winter white blazer immaculate, posture tall, fingers resting on a leather folio like a signature waiting for ink. Grace slipped into a bench behind them. Neither party nor stranger, the person who had been in the room when the numbers lowered their voice. Case of Reed versus Whitmore, the clerk announced. Modification of custody. Parties ready? Ready, said both attorneys, their voices trained to cut and not bleed. Judge Eleanor Shaw entered with the composed air of someone who understands that a gavel is a compass, not a hammer. She nodded to the room. Let's begin. Vanessa's attorney went first, a man whose words marched in clean formation. Your Honor, we present evidence that Mr. Whitmore failed to secure appropriate educational support for the minor child until recently, relying instead on an uncredentialed household employee. The child's low academic performance prior to the last month is documented. He clicked a remote, the screen lit with a row of report cards, math scores in the low range. Teachers' comments about avoidance and meltdown during assessment. He advanced to emails from household staff complaining about classroom activity in shared areas and disruption of routines. Another click brought up glossy photos, the whiteboard in the breakfast nook, magnets lined like candy on the tray, a bowl of counters on the window sill. All in common spaces. Without boundaries or oversight, he said. We also include declarations noting that the tutoring was conducted by Ms. Allen, not licensed to teach. He paused, letting the neat stack of facts look heavier than they were. Daniel's attorney stood. Her voice held the strength of someone who had walked families through storms before. Your Honor, the child's recent progress is not an accident. It is measurable, corroborated, and the direct result of a supportive, structured home environment, not a chaotic one. She advanced her own slides. Emails from Noah's classroom teacher noting increased participation, self-initiated problem-solving, calmer effect. Next, the Westbridge letter, acceptance, scholarship. Child-led, and appropriately scaffolded. Child exhibited reduced anxiety, fewer fidgeting behaviors, longer on-task periods, and initiated questions without prompting. MS. Allen's language emphasized strategy over outcome. No evidence of coercion or shaming. Sessions took place during times that did not interfere with household operations. Daniel's attorney added. And to address claims of disruption, we present security clips from the week in question. The screen showed time-stamped video, the breakfast nook in late afternoons, quiet. Grace and Noah seated low at the table, voices inaudible, movements measured. No traffic jams of staff. No raised voices. Another clip showed the laundry room at dusk, a floor lamp's warm pool. A towel on the tile, a round of practice that looked, to a camera, like peace. Vanessa's attorney didn't flinch. Improvement, yes. But improvement that underscores a delay. We submit that earlier professional intervention would likely have prevented months of underperformance. We ask for joint legal custody to ensure educational decisions are made with proper safeguards. Judge Shaw looked from one table to the other. I'd like to hear from Ms. Allen, she said. Grace stood, palms dry only because she had willed them to be. She walked to the witness stand and sat. The microphone too close, then just right. Ms. Allen, the judge said. You've been helping the child. On what basis? On the basis that he was hurting, Grace answered, her voice steady. We followed rules even when the rules felt like they were made for a problem, not for a child. The judge nodded. Then addressed the lawyers with the easy firmness of a school principal who has seen fads come and go. I've reviewed the evidence, she said. I see a child who struggled, then improved. I see a father who, if slow to find the right support, is now taking appropriate steps. I see a mother who wants structure and accountability, both good words. I see a non-credentialed helper whose methods were gentle and effective, and I see the need to formalize what has been informal. She set down her pen. The modification to joint custody is denied at this time. The words landed like stones in a river, redirecting the current without stopping it. Primary physical custody remains with Mr. Whitmore. Vanessa drew breath through her nose, composed. However, Judge Shaw continued, Ms. Reed will have expanded visitation, alternate weekends, one midweek afternoon, alternating holidays. An extended time during summer break. I further order that both parents complete a co-parenting class within 60 days, focusing on communication and shared decision-making. She glanced at Dr. Landry. An independent child advocate will remain appointed for 6 months to monitor the child's well-being and progress. She turned back to Daniel. Across the aisle, Vanessa's posture softened by a degree. Expanded time was not surrender. It was a bridge she could step onto without losing face. From the second row, Adela watched the judge. Then Grace, then Noah, who had been allowed to sit in the back with a book and had not turned a page. Adela's eyes, so often set to skeptical, loosened. She had seen houses stand on rules alone and wobble. She had also seen them stand on mercy. In her look toward Grace sat something new, acknowledgement. She nodded once, slow and certain. Yes, Your Honor. Yes, Your Honor. The words were still warm in her mouth when the courthouse doors breathed them back out into daylight. By evening, Grace was at the small desk in her room above the garage, laptop open to a university portal. The welcome page glowed with orientation, start here, and beneath it. Mornings belonged to Noah, breakfast nook, school drop-off, practice plans. Evenings belonged to lectures and reading. The schedule felt packed but oddly breathable. Like a path through a forest where someone had tied ribbon to the trees. Day 1, the house woke to coffee and lemon. Noah's cereal spoon clinked, and the whiteboard gleamed, waiting. Grace set up the morning's plan with quiet care, pairs that make 10, a skip count like a walking song, one-word problem with pictures layered under the text. She wrote the day's aim in tiny print at the board's corner, we notice patterns. They finished before the clock slid to 9. On her way to the laundry, Grace passed the supply cabinet near the mudroom and paused. The door sat barely ajar, a sliver of light inside. She would have kept moving, but the sound that followed, a soft rattle. A box sliding, wasn't the sound of a door shifting in its hinges. It was the sound of searching. Adela arrived at the same moment from the other end of the hall. She stilled, took in the sliver of light, and raised 2 fingers without looking at Grace. Wait. Adela opened the cabinet with the authority of someone who had kept order in houses longer than most people keep cars. Inside, the temp from the agency, tall, anxious. Eyes too quick, froze with a container of counters half lifted and a packet of number cards fanned like a deck. He recovered a touch too late. Looking for something? Adela asked, voice level. After the door closed, Adela stayed in the mudroom with the cabinet. She wiped the shelves with lemon oil, let the citrus lift the air, and began sorting. She labeled clear bins with a neat hand. Marks can sign off on the plan. Grace let the idea open like a door. She pictured a gym that smelled of floor wax and hope, tables with baskets of counters, a corner for a rhythm station. A taped footpath for hop counting. She pictured parents watching their kids stop flinching at numbers. Let's try, she said. Small. Intentional. They sketched on the back of a used envelope. For stations, see it, visual, hear it, auditory, move it, kinesthetic, and solve and tell, language. At see it. Fraction circles would layer colors like stained glass until halves and quarters made sense to the eye. At hear it, skip count would ride a soft drum, 2, 4, 6, clap, clap, 8. 10, kids invited to set the tempo. At move it, foam number pads on the floor would turn addition into walking and subtraction into turning back. At solve and tell, a card with a short story would be backed by a small drawing, boat, storm, rescue, dual coding that made language less slippery. Grace built a simple behavior rubric for the wall, nothing punitive. Only clear, be ready, eyes, tools, hands calm. Be kind, words, space, patience. Be brave, try, switch strategies, ask. For each rotation, kids would circle which "be" they used most. It would not be a prize, it would be a mirror. Saturday came. The center's gym echoed with cautious hellos. Some children hid behind hips. Others ran straight to the colored circles and stopped mid-stride, unsure. Grace crouched to greet each one at eye level. "We're going to make numbers a little quieter today," she said. "You get to choose how you learn best." At see it, a girl in a pink hoodie laid a yellow half over 2 blue quarters and whispered, "They're the same," like she had discovered twins. At hear it, a boy who had refused to write counted by fives with a plastic shaker, shoulders loosening when his hands did the work first. At move it, a pair of cousins hop counted by threes, laughing when they missed and laughing harder when they tried again. At solve and tell, a 4th grader read a word problem about sharing muffins and then drew 6 little circles with crumbs on top because that's what muffins look like after siblings. Equal means the same. Parents edged closer over the hour. They watched their kids not cry. They watched them try. A few eyes shone. One mother touched the corner of her mouth with her sleeve and said to no one in particular, "I didn't know it could be like this." After the session, Grace stacked fraction circles and wiped the shaker handles. Dr. Lila Marks, who had arrived halfway through and stayed at the door like a measuring stick, stepped forward. "You built a scaffold. Not a stage," she observed. "Send me your plan. I'll attach my signature." Back at the house that evening, the nook felt different again, not louder, not busier, just more certain. The supply cabinet stood ready, bins labeled, lids quiet. Grace logged into her course, put on headphones, and took notes on differentiation while the house breathed around her. Visual, auditory, kinesthetic. Multiple routes to the same truth. She could feel the ideas piping directly into her morning plans. She closed her laptop to find Noah on the threshold. Shoelaces in 2 loose bows, the strip of progress stickers from the laundry room tucked in his fist like a ticket. He looked older in the way kids do when they've been brave in public. "If you go to classes," he asked, voice small enough to ask for safety without making a scene, "will you still teach me?" Grace set her notes aside and reached for his hand, warm and real. She squeezed, not once, but twice, their signal that meant "I'm here and I'm here again." "Always," she said. Grace's fingers were still wrapped around Noah's when Monday arrived with its ordinary noises, the kettle's soft click, the heater's sigh, the jays arguing in the oak. She kept the squeeze a beat longer, a promise held in the palm, then let the day lift them forward. Doubts found them first. The PTA meeting in the multipurpose room hummed with coffee, folding chairs, and the kind of smiles that carry qualifiers. A parent with a neat bob flipped through the agenda and looked up. "Online credential?" she asked, voice crisp. "Isn't that paper walls?" A few heads nodded. A board member cleared his throat. "We just want to be sure instruction isn't built on shortcuts." Grace held her notes under the table, feeling the thin edges. Daniel sat 2 seats away, listening like a man who knows a house can be judged by the thickness of its blueprints, even when the beams are sound. Dr. Lila Marks, attending as the supervising educator, lifted a hand. "Quality is in the design, she said calmly. Ms. Allen's coursework is state-approved. More importantly, the work aligns. Objective to activity to assessment. A paper wall is flimsy. This is framed. The room shifted by a degree. The bobbed parent softened. We'll want updates, she said. Which in school language meant we're not convinced, but we're not unconvinced either. That night, Grace logged into Zoom for her program's community share. Faces tiled the screen. Teachers in dim kitchens, students under dorm lamps, a grandmother perched at a tidy desk with a vase of daisies. The moderator smiled. Who'd like to start? Grace unmuted before she could lose courage. My classroom began in a laundry room, she said, and the chat paused, curious. She told them about the towel on the tile, the dryer's calm heartbeat. The boy whose shoulders dropped when numbers lowered their voice. She described using objects, then pictures, then symbols, and how Think Aloud's turned her process into a bridge he could cross. She admitted to a sticky eraser, a missing magnet, a supply cabinet that needed guarding, and how community, not credentials alone, steadied the path. The chat erupted. This is what equity looks like. Someone typed. Laundry room to learning room. Stealing the numbers less loud line, crediting you. My students need the rhythm idea, thank you. The squares on Grace's screen felt like lanterns, a string of lights across distance. A private message slid into the corner of her screen from Professor Hector Salazar. Whose course on assessment she'd admired from minute one. Would you consider joining our mentorship track? He wrote. You have a voice we need our candidates to hear. Grace exhaled. Smiling at the small square of her own face. Yes, she typed, then corrected, I'd be honored. Saturday's pilot workshop at the community center grew from a handful of families to a small crowd. The gym smelled of floor wax and oranges from the snack table. Banners marked the 4 stations Grace and Daniel had sketched on an envelope: see it, hear it, move it, solve and tell. Volunteers taped down foam numbers. Dr. Marks checked the plan and nodded. Run it, she said. I'm here. Grace started each rotation with scaffold questions. The kind that opened gently and then reached. At see it, she laid 2 fraction circles side by side. What do you notice? A prompt. When a child said, they don't match, she probed. What's the same? What's different? When an older girl whispered, 2 quarters fit the half, Grace stretched, how many quarters to make a whole? How do you know? The girl set pieces like stained glass and grinned. 4. Because I can see it and say it. At hear it, Skip Count wrote a soft shaker beat. Count by 2s to 12, Grace prompted. When a little boy froze, she shifted to probe, what's 2 more than 4? He tapped the shaker against his palm, 6, and his shoulders eased. Then came the stretch. Can you start at 6 and count backward by 2s? He tried. He laughed when he stumbled. He tried again. Retrieval practice slipped in as a game, quick look cards flashing dots in shapes. Turn and tell your partner, and then a minute later, tell it again without the card. Each time the recall came faster, kids blinked at their own brains, delighted. At move it. Cousins Hop counted on floor numbers by 3s, the foam pads thudding lightly under sneakers. Grace prompted, where will you land if you jump 3 from 9? Probe, show me with your feet. Stretch, if you go too far, how do you fix it? They stepped back, giggling, retrieving the truth with their bodies first, then with their mouths. Solve and tell mixed pictures with words. A 4th grader circled equally with his finger in the air. Prompt, what could you draw to see it? Probe, how many each if you don't cut? Stretch, what if you do? He tried both. Then taught a younger sibling sitting beside him, which is the moment learning stands up and walks around. Parents watched from the sidelines, posture slowly changing from guarded to present. During a break, a mother in a denim jacket touched Grace's elbow, voice low. "My kid isn't afraid of numbers anymore," she whispered, as if speaking too loudly might make the courage spook. "Not today." Daniel moved water bottles and righted cones, eyes catching Grace's from across the room, a quiet yes traveling the distance. "Dar." Mark scribbled a note on her clipboard and lifted a thumb almost imperceptibly. Adela, who had insisted on helping, because order doesn't keep itself, restored markers to their bins with the satisfaction of naming things and seeing them stay named. Between rotations, Grace checked her small behavior rubric: be ready, be kind, be brave, asking kids to circle which bee they'd used most. "Be brave," a boy circled in bold, then added, "I asked," underneath. Grace could have cried for the accuracy. As the session wound down, retrieval turned into celebration. "Tell me one pattern you can still see with your eyes closed," Grace said. "One problem you can solve without the card." Hands shot up. 5 and 5 make 10. 2, 4, 6, 8. If there are 6 muffins and 3 kids, 2 each. The gym echoed with answers, a chorus stitched by small successes. They packed up in the soft light of late afternoon. The floor wore a constellation of tape remnants and the kind of crumbs that mean snacks were eaten more than dropped. Grace placed the fraction circles back into labeled bins, the shaker eggs into their crate, the quick look cards into a pouch that zipped with a satisfying finality. The work was ordinary and holy all at once. On her way to the exit, Grace slowed. Outside the glass doors, under the shade of a sycamore, a woman stood with a posture Grace knew before the face came into focus. Vanessa. She wasn't on her phone. She wasn't issuing directives to the air. She was watching through the glass, kids counting, parents nodding, a boy with a shaker egg finding a beat that steadied his breath. Vanessa's expression didn't soften, not exactly. It shifted. The way a coastline looks different when the tide slips out. Grace lifted a hand, not quite a wave, more an open palm that said we both see him. Vanessa held her gaze for a heartbeat, then turned and walked toward the parking lot, heels careful on the concrete. The door whispered shut behind her. Grace stood with a crate in her hands and watched the last circle of kids spin out to their families, some already chanting by twos. The evening light lay warm on the floor, turning the tape scraps to little gold commas. Vanessa's silhouette dissolved into the parking lot, and the gym doors eased shut. By the time dusk settled over Marin, Grace was back at her small desk above the garage, the window cracked to the night. Highway 101 breathed in the distance, a soft shush like the tide. A foghorn sounded from the bay, low and patient. She opened the CalTPA portal, Task 1 status blinking. Revision required. Her hands trembled once, then twice. She clicked the rubric. The feedback was clean, surgical. Objectives: assessment mismatch. Your stated objective, students will explain how pairs form 10 using objects and drawings, is not measured by your timed fact fluency exit slip. Revise to align what you teach, what students do, and how you evaluate. Insufficient differentiation for ELLs. Provide explicit scaffolds, visual sentence frames, structured partner talk, and modeled explanations. Add multiple means of representation and expression. Her eyes stung. Streetlight made a pale ladder on the wall. She pressed fingertips into her brow and felt shame arrive. Then slow. Somewhere below, a raccoon knocked a bin and reconsidered. The ordinary world kept going, which helped. A knock at the door, soft as a question. Noah stood there in socks, hair wild with sleep. He held a folded note, the edges crooked. "You taught me to try again," it read in blue marker, the Y in try looped twice like a promise. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. He climbed onto the narrow chair, tucked one knee under, and leaned his shoulder against her arm. They breathed together until the foghorn sounded once more. Like a metronome set to human scale. The next afternoon, Dr. Lila Marks sat at the same desk, blazer off, sleeves pushed to her elbows. She slid Grace's plan and the rubric side by side. As if alignment could be seen as well as done. Name what you're teaching in a sentence a child could say back, Lila began. Then make the activity and the assessment match that sentence. Grace wrote, slow to keep her courage in the lines, we're learning to make 10 and tell how we did it. Good, Lila said. Now UDL. How will they access it, act on it? And show it, more than one way each? Grace sketched a 3-column grid. Engagement, choice baskets, buttons, beans, tiles, quick wins first, partner roles. Representation, 10 frames, pictures. Gestures, teacher think aloud paired with visuals. Action/expression, build with objects, draw it, write the equation, record a sentence on a tablet. For ELLs, Lila added. Add visual sentence frames and planned partner talk. Not turn and talk, but specific, timed. Pair a confident speaker with a quieter one and give both jobs. Grace wrote the frame on a sticky note. I made 10 with underscore 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 and underscore underscore underscore. I know because underscore underscore underscore. She drew a tiny image of 2 piles under the blanks. Think pair share, she asked. With a cue, Lila said, tapping. Prompt to probe to stretch. What did you build? How do you know? Can you show it a different way? That's your questioning scaffold. They tackled data next. Collect a baseline before the mini lesson, Lila said. I can also make 10 with 6 and 4. I'll show it with counters, a drawing, and 6 plus 4 is equal to 10. Now I'll say it, I made 10 with 6 and 4 because 4 fills the empty boxes. Lila smiled. Daniel put a hand to the back of his neck, steady, proud. Grace marked the star brighter. Friday night, Grace uploaded the revised Task 1, Objective Written Plain, activities that matched. Evidence ready to show. She attached the sentence frames, the pair roll cards, the baseline/exit ticket samples. She typed a short reflection that admitted the miss and named the fix. I aligned the learning target, tasks, and assessment and layered UDL with explicit ELL supports. Students can now access, act, and express in multiple ways, and my evidence captures the stated goal. She clicked submit. The house lifted and settled. Outside, a stray car rolled past and faded. Inside, she laid out Saturday's materials for the workshop, fraction circles, shaker eggs, foam numbers. Mini frames. The supply cabinet, newly labeled by Adela's careful hand, held order like a vow. Saturday at dawn, Noah rolled a small suitcase to the door. Vanessa arrived with a hug pressed into efficiency. Back by 11, she said, glancing at Daniel, then at Grace. Don't be late for your project. On the tarmac in Seattle. Noah took a picture of the first airplane he remembered not fearing, then another of a museum whale skeleton bigger than his house. He texted Grace a photo of his breakfast, pancakes with blueberries, captioned equal shares face with tears of joy with 3 blue dots in a stack. At 9:15 a.m., he and Vanessa boarded the return flight. At 10:57, he ran into the community center gym and straight to the Move It station, breathless and beaming. Made it, he said. We start with 3s. Later. When the gym had been swept and the shaker eggs stacked, Grace climbed the stairs to her room. The CalTPA portal waited like a held breath. She refreshed. A small green banner bloomed. Task 1, pass. Her lungs remembered how to let go. She laughed once, then pressed both palms to the desk, forehead tipping forward, eyes closing against the sweet sting. Outside, the foghorn sounded again, low. Patient, sure, and the night felt a fraction softer. The green banner on the CalTPA portal had barely faded from Grace's eyes when the next message arrived, clean, official. The kind of email that makes you sit up straighter. California Commission on Teacher Credentialing, preliminary multiple subject credential, issued. She read it twice, then once more aloud. Smiling at the shape her name made beside the word teacher. Downstairs, morning light spilled across the breakfast nook, the house smelled faintly of lemon and toast. She printed the certificate when the PDF landed, the paper warm in her hands like something alive. By noon a second envelope slid through the mail slot, heavy with embossed edges. Westbridge Academy, official welcome. The letter confirmed Noah's scholarship, his spring start, and a note in tidy script, we look forward to nurturing his mathematical reasoning. Noah traced the crest with one finger and whispered, they're expecting me. 6 months have a way of moving like water when there's something steady to flow around. The child advocate's calendar date arrived with none of the dread that once crept into the house with official papers. In Judge Shaw's chambers, the wood gleamed and the windows held a wide Marin sky. Dr. Ruth Landry set a slender report on the table, ironed by experience, generous in its lines. Your Honor, she began, voice kind without losing edge. The child presents reduced anxiety indicators, longer on-task periods, fewer avoidance behaviors. He initiates problem solving, requests clarification without distress, and demonstrates transfer of strategies across settings, home to school and community. Co-parenting communication has improved, schedules are respected. Supervision can conclude without reservations. Judge Shaw tapped the report once. Noted. She looked to Daniel and Vanessa in turn. Good work. Sustained presence is the point. Vanessa, her winter white blazer replaced by a softer navy. Unannounced, standing at the gym's glass like a shadow made of decisions. Inside, Noah balanced on a phone number line, leading skip counts at the Move It station, 9, 12, 15, voice bright. Shoulders easy. When he spotted her, he didn't freeze or flinch. He waved her in. Vanessa stepped across the threshold and stood near the bleachers, hands clasped. Grace greeted her with the same open palm she had offered through glass, then handed Noah a tiny stack of visual sentence frames. He paired with a younger boy at Solve and Tell and said, I made 10 with 6 and 4 because 4 fills the empty boxes, like he was offering a secret that the whole room deserved to hear. Vanessa's chin dipped. The kind of nod that means I see what I almost missed. She stayed the whole hour. When it ended, she smoothed Noah's hair and said, not to the room, not to her lawyer, but to her son. I love watching you love this. Back at the house, order had become invitation. The supply cabinet in the mudroom was a lesson in clarity, clear bins with Adela's tidy labels. Lids that closed like soft promises. Daniel asked Adela to step into the study one afternoon and handed her a simple letter and a small velvet box. For excellence in managing the home and protecting a child's learning, the letter read, signed in his careful hand. The box held a silver key fob engraved with her initials and a bonus that looked to Adela like dignity made visible. She blinked once and returned to the kitchen without fanfare, but later Grace caught her patting the cabinet's edge as if it were a shoulder. The Saturdays grew into a rhythm the town could set its watch by. Bridge Builder's Workshop hung on a banner that smelled faintly of fresh vinyl. Dar. Lila Marks reviewed Grace's plans with brisk nods and fewer red pens with each passing month. The stations clicked into muscle memory. See it. Overlapping fraction circles that caught light like stained glass. Hear it, shaker eggs and gentle drums measuring skip counts into courage. Move it. A gap-toothed beam that had nothing to prove and everything to share. He looked at the whiteboard, at the workshop calendar with its small stars, at the rainbow path framed on the wall. "Can we build the next path?" he asked, drawing out the last word like a bridge he hadn't named yet. "We can," Grace said. Daniel answered at the same time. Their voices overlapped, then found harmony. Spring stretched its clean blue over Marin. Judge Shaw signed the final order to close the child advocate's file, Dr. Landry mailed a last postcard with a handwritten line, "Keep noticing what works. Keep naming it." Vanessa's visitations became visits, then time that didn't have to be labeled to be real. She brought muffins to the workshop one week and asked 2 children if they'd teach her the shaker rhythm. They did. She kept the beat. On quiet evenings, the house returned to the gentle music that had once saved them, the dryer's hum, the kettle's click, the whisper of a marker across a whiteboard. When the windows were open, you could hear children from the sidewalk, neighbors, clinic kids, Noah and a friend, counting in different tempos that somehow braided, 2, 4, 6, 5, 10. The camera, if there had been one, would linger on the certificate and the rainbow path side by side, then drift to the doorway where 3 silhouettes make a shape large enough for a 4th, 5th, 6th. The counting thins, recedes, leaves behind the quiet that belongs to homes where learning is welcome and no one is waiting to fail. Because what stayed when the plot points ended was simple and whole: kindness with method, family as presence, not perfection, a community opened by paths anyone can walk. Bridges are built from wood and rope and stone, but the strongest ones here were made from patience, practice, and the belief that no one has to cross alone.